See your stomach. You filthy thing. You disgust me. Every time I see that scar, I feel sick. This house is smelling.
Ruined? Disgust. Desmond, don't speak like that, please.
Cover it. I don't want to look at it.
One day, you'll understand that this scar isn't a mark of shame.
Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you were willing to give away a part of your own body just to keep them alive? What if, after making that sacrifice, the same person looked you in the eyes and said, "You disgust me"? What if the scar you carried to save your family became the very reason the person you loved could no longer bear to look at you? This is the heartbreaking story of Jane Blessing, a woman who risked everything to save her husband's future. She gave up a kidney. She endured months of pain. She protected his pride with lies upon lies. Yet the reward she received was rejection. But life has a remarkable way of restoring those who choose kindness over bitterness. Stay with me until the very end, because this story proves that sacrifices made in love are never truly forgotten. And before we begin, kindly subscribe to Storybanquet Films so you never miss this story and other inspiring stories. Leave a like and comment. Jane Blessing met Desmond Adid through a mutual friend at the University of Nigeria. She was studying law. Desmond was studying business administration. From the first conversation they shared beneath the shade of an old mango tree on campus, there was an undeniable connection between them. Desmond possessed a quiet confidence that drew people toward him. He had charming eyes, a deep, commanding voice, a well-built frame, and dreams so big that even his closest friends sometimes laughed at them. Jane admired something else: his determination. Whenever life knocked him down, he always found a way to rise again. That resilience captured her heart. Before long, friendship blossomed into love. By their final year, they had become the most admired couple on campus. Students often smiled whenever they saw them walking hand in hand. Lecturers joked that they looked like characters from a romantic movie. For 2 consecutive years, they won the university's Couple of the Year award. Whenever her friends asked why she loved Desmond so much, Jane never hesitated. She would smile warmly and say, "Because he loves me with all his heart, and because he never gives up." Whenever Desmond heard her say those words, he would squeeze her hand gently and reply, "One day, I'll own one of the biggest business management consulting firms in Nigeria. I'll advise the biggest companies. I'll create opportunities for thousands of people. And when that day comes," he would look into her eyes, "you won't just be my wife. You'll be my greatest partner. And I'll spend the rest of my life making you proud." Jane believed every single word, not because he was already successful, but because she believed in the man behind the dream. After graduation, they completed their National Youth Service Corps and got married in a modest ceremony attended by family and close friends. There was no extravagant reception, no luxury decorations, no celebrity guests, only genuine love. They began married life with almost nothing. Their first home was a tiny one-room apartment in a crowded Face Me I Face You compound in Ikorodu, Lagos. The walls were cracked. The zinc roof leaked whenever heavy rain fell. 10 other tenants shared the same bathroom and toilet. Every morning began with a queue of buckets outside the bathroom door. Some evenings, electricity disappeared without warning. On difficult days, dinner consisted of nothing more than gari and groundnuts. No sugar, no milk, yet they laughed through every hardship. On hot nights, they sat outside beneath the stars, sharing dreams instead of complaints. Neighbors admired them. One elderly woman often smiled whenever she saw them together. "If true love has a face," she would say, "it looks like Jane and Desmond." Neither of them knew that life was quietly preparing a test that would challenge every promise they had ever made. Months became years. Slowly, their hard work began to produce results. Desmond secured consulting jobs for small businesses. Satisfied clients recommended him to larger companies. His reputation grew steadily. Then an old university friend introduced him to influential business executives looking for someone to manage complex corporate portfolios. Desmond seized the opportunity. He worked tirelessly. Late nights became normal. Weekends disappeared into meetings. Eventually, he established his own company. Desmond, a DG business management consult. The company specialized in managing business portfolios, restructuring struggling organizations, and advising corporate clients across Nigeria. Within a few years, the company flourished. Major organizations sought his expertise. Foreign investors requested his advice. Government agencies invited him to consult on strategic projects. The little room in Ikorodu became too small for the life they were building. For the first time, financial peace entered their home. Jane thanked God every day. She believed the difficult years were finally behind them. She had no idea that their greatest trial had not yet begun. Desmond ignored the pain for several weeks. He blamed it on stress. After all, his company had grown beyond anything he had imagined. Every day brought another client, another contract, another meeting, another flight. Jane noticed the dark circles beneath his eyes. "You've been working too hard. You need to rest." Desmond smiled. "I'll rest after this next project." A few days later, Desmond secured what everyone described as the biggest contract of his career. A powerful politician wanted his firm to restructure several companies linked to his business empire. The contract was worth hundreds of millions of naira. It would place Desmond, a DG business management consult, among the biggest consulting firms in Nigeria. To execute the project, Desmond invested almost everything the company had. He borrowed heavily from commercial lenders. When that wasn't enough, he turned to private financiers and loan sharks who promised quick access to cash. The interest rates were frightening. Jane frowned when she saw the documents. "These terms are dangerous." Desmond nodded. "I know, but once we're paid, every loan will disappear." The project lasted almost 10 months. Desmond barely slept. He supervised every stage personally. His staff worked around the clock. Finally, the work was completed. The reports were delivered. But days passed. No payment came. His finance department called repeatedly. No response. His lawyers sent reminders. Nothing. Then came the shocking news. The politician had refused to honor the agreement. Desmond couldn't believe it. He traveled to Abuja hoping to resolve the matter. After waiting several hours, he was denied access to the politician. He returned home exhausted. Jane saw the disappointment on his face. Within weeks, the lenders began demanding repayment. The commercial banks issued warnings. The private financiers became aggressive. The loan sharks were far worse. They called every hour. Their threats became more frightening with each passing day. One morning, at exactly 5 o'clock, several men arrived outside their compound. Neighbors watched nervously from their windows. The leader stepped forward. "Mr. Desmond, a DG." Desmond walked outside. "I've been expecting you." The man smiled coldly. "You have 7 days. Just 7 days or else. If we don't get our money, you'll wish prison was your biggest problem." He leaned closer. "You can't hide from us. We will find you. And when we do, you'll regret ever borrowing our money." The men drove away. Silence filled the compound. Jane stood at the doorway, trembling. Desmond tried to reassure her. It will be all right. But even he no longer believed his own words. From that day, sleep disappeared from their home. Desmond stopped eating properly. His blood pressure climbed dangerously high. He spent hours staring at unpaid invoices. Every ringing phone sent fear through his body. Every knock on the gate made his heart race. Jane watched helplessly as the confident man she had married slowly crumbled under the weight of pressure. Then, one afternoon, while addressing senior managers during a strategy meeting at his office, Desmond suddenly stopped speaking. He grabbed his chest. His vision blurred. The room spun around him. Before anyone could react, he collapsed to the floor. His personal assistant immediately called for help. Within minutes, Desmond was rushed to St. Catherine's Specialist Hospital. Jane's phone rang. She answered with a smile. But the smile disappeared the moment she heard the trembling voice on the other end. "Ma, it's Mr. Desmond. He has collapsed." The world around her suddenly stood still. Jane arrived at St. Catherine's Specialist Hospital barely 20 minutes after receiving the call. Her heart pounded as she ran through the emergency entrance. "Please." "My husband, Desmond, a DG." A nurse immediately recognized the name. This way, Ma. She hurried behind the nurse until they reached the emergency unit. Through the glass window, she saw doctors and nurses working frantically around Desmond. Machines beeped continuously. An oxygen mask covered his face. His usually confident expression had disappeared. For the first time since they met, he looked helpless. Jane pressed her trembling hands together. Please, God, don't take him from me. A few minutes later, an elderly physician stepped out. His name tag read, Dr. James Adebayo. Mrs. Adidji? Yes, doctor. I'm Dr. James. We've managed to stabilize your husband. Jane released a long breath. But the doctor's expression became serious. His blood pressure was dangerously high. From our assessment, he has been under severe emotional and physical stress for a long time. If he had arrived much later, he paused. We might have lost him. Jane covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. Dr. James continued gently. We're admitting him immediately for further treatment and observation. She sat beside Desmond's bed, holding his hand. Even while unconscious, he squeezed her fingers slightly. She smiled through her tears. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. For the next 3 days, Jane barely slept. She prayed. She encouraged him. She spoke words of hope whenever he opened his eyes. The loan sharks were still calling. The debts remained unpaid. And every passing day increased the interest they owed. One quiet afternoon, Jane stepped out of the ward to clear her mind. As she walked slowly down the corridor, she overheard 2 nurses speaking in low voices near the transplant unit. There is a foreign patient still waiting. Yes, the second nurse replied. They've screened so many people. None of them is a compatible donor. I pity that man. The first nurse sighed. The patient's charitable foundation has promised to provide substantial financial assistance for any approved living donor and the donor's immediate family. If only they could find someone compatible. Jane stopped walking. Her heart skipped. Financial assistance? Enough to help a donor's family? Could that amount clear Desmond's debts? Could it finally free them from the men threatening to destroy their lives? That evening, she sat beside Desmond's hospital bed. She held his hand. Desmond. He looked at her weakly. Yes? I heard something today. She carefully explained what the nurses had discussed. Before she finished speaking, Desmond shook his head. No. If anyone is donating, it will be me. Jane smiled faintly. The following morning, they informed the transplant coordinator that Desmond wished to be evaluated. A full series of medical tests was arranged. Blood samples were taken. Scans were performed. The waiting felt endless. Finally, the results came back. The transplant specialist looked at Desmond with sympathy. I'm sorry. You are not a compatible match. Silence filled the consultation room. I want to be tested. Desmond immediately protested. No. I won't allow it. Jane squeezed his hand gently. Let's first know whether I'm even compatible. Neither of them realized that Jane's next decision would change both of their lives forever. The following morning, Jane reported to the transplant unit. She had hardly slept. Questions filled her mind. What if she wasn't compatible? What if she was? A nurse welcomed her warmly. Mrs. Adidji, well, begin your evaluation now. For hours, Jane moved from one department to another. Blood samples were collected. X-rays were taken. CT scans followed. Her kidneys were examined. Her heart was assessed. Specialists asked detailed questions about her medical history. Late that afternoon, she and Desmond sat together inside the transplant coordinator's office. The lead surgeon entered with a folder in his hands. We have received the laboratory results. Jane instinctively held her husband's hand. The doctor smiled gently. Mrs. Adidji, you are a compatible match. Silence filled the room. Jane closed her eyes briefly. No. The doctor looked at him. Mr. Adidji. I said no. He turned toward Jane. You're not donating anything. Jane remained calm. Desmond. No. I won't allow it. The doctor waited quietly. Jane reached for her husband's hand. You wanted to donate first. You weren't compatible. Now I am. He looked at her with tears in his eyes. I can't watch you go through that. The doctor spoke carefully. Mrs. Adid G, compatibility alone isn't enough. There are other factors we must evaluate. We also need to ensure you're making this decision freely. There must be no pressure. Jane nodded. I understand. Days later, the transplant committee met to review her case. Some members expressed concern over parts of Jane's medical history. Additional tests were requested. More specialists were consulted. Jane patiently completed every evaluation. Finally, the lead surgeon invited her back to his office. We've completed our review. He smiled. After careful consideration, we've concluded that you can safely proceed. Provided you still wish to donate. Jane didn't hesitate. I do. The surgeon placed several documents before her. Consent forms, medical explanations, legal declarations. He slid a pen toward her. I'd like you to read everything carefully. Jane spent several minutes reading each page. She understood the risks. She understood there were no guarantees. She understood that once the operation was complete, her life would never be exactly the same again. She picked up the pen, then signed every document. Before leaving the office, she stopped at the door. Doctor. Yes, Mrs. Adid G. The financial assistance from the recipient's charitable foundation. If the transplant is successful, will it truly be enough to help my family? The surgeon nodded. The foundation has a well-established program. If everything proceeds, the approved assistance will be transferred lawfully after the donation. Jane lowered her head. Thank you. The day of the surgery finally arrived. Long before sunrise, St. Catherine's Specialist Hospital was already awake. Doctors moved swiftly through the corridors. Nurses prepared operating rooms. Medical equipment was checked one final time. Good morning, Mrs. Adid G. It's almost time. Jane nodded gently. May I see my husband before I go? A few minutes later, Desmond was wheeled into her room. He still looked weak from the hypertensive crisis, but his condition had improved considerably. Seeing Jane dressed for surgery filled him with emotion. He reached for her hand. You don't have to do this. Jane smiled softly. I know. He struggled to hold back tears. I'm sorry. For everything you've been carrying. For putting us in this situation. Jane shook her head. We're husband and wife. We carry life's burdens together. A nurse gently interrupted. It's time. Desmond held her hand tightly. I love you. Jane leaned closer and kissed his forehead. I love you too. Those were the last words they exchanged before she was taken to the operating theater. Inside the operating theater, the transplant team was already waiting. Bright surgical lights illuminated the room. The lead surgeon greeted her kindly. Are you ready? Jane nodded. Yes, doctor. The transplant was successful. The recipient's surgery was also completed successfully. 2 lives had been changed forever. Several hours later, Jane slowly opened her eyes in the recovery room. Her body felt unusually heavy. A dull ache spread across her abdomen. She tried to speak. The nurse leaned closer. Jane whispered, But the financial assistance been transferred? The nurse smiled reassuringly. The hospital has received confirmation. The recipient's charitable foundation has approved the assistance. It will be processed according to the program. Before the nurse stepped away, Jane gently held her wrist. Please. The nurse bent closer. There is one more thing. Yes? Don't tell my husband. The nurse looked surprised. About the donation. I don't want him blaming himself. I don't want him carrying that burden. The nurse hesitated. This is a very important secret. Jane nodded. I know. But I'm asking you. Please. Later that afternoon, the lead surgeon visited her room. Jane repeated the same request. Doctor. Promise me. Don't tell Desmond. The surgeon sighed softly. Mrs. Adid G. One day, he may discover the truth. Jane smiled faintly. If that day ever comes, let it come from God, not from me. Meanwhile, Desmond repeatedly asked the nurses why Jane's surgery had taken so long. The doctors had already agreed on what they would tell him. Dr. James smiled kindly. Your wife developed acute appendicitis during her admission. We decided it was safer to remove her appendix immediately. Desmond looked shocked. Is she all right? She's recovering well. But she'll need time. He nodded gratefully. A few days later, the charitable foundation completed the financial assistance. Every naira was transferred exactly as promised. Jane quietly instructed her lawyer to use the money to settle every outstanding debt. Desmond slowly recovered from the hypertensive crisis that had almost claimed his life. His doctors advised him to avoid unnecessary stress. Take your medications regularly. Eat healthy. Exercise. And most importantly, don't carry the weight of the whole world on your shoulders. Desmond smiled. I've learned my lesson, doctor. Little did he know. The woman sitting beside him had made the greatest sacrifice of all. Jane's recovery was far more difficult. Every morning began with pain. Turning in bed became a struggle. Some days, she needed several minutes just to stand upright. Her body tired easily. Simple household chores left her exhausted. Still, she never complained. Every few weeks, she quietly returned to St. Catherine's Specialist Hospital for follow-up appointments. She went alone. Desmond never suspected anything. Whenever he asked why she still looked weak after her appendix surgery, she simply smiled. I guess my body heals differently. With the debts behind him, he returned to Desmond, a D.G. business management consult with renewed determination. He worked harder than ever before. He rebuilt broken relationships with clients. He introduced better financial controls. Within 2 years, his business had expanded beyond Nigeria into several West African countries. Money flowed again, this time in abundance. The tiny apartment in Ikorodu became a distant memory. Desmond bought a magnificent duplex in Lekki. Luxury cars filled the compound. Domestic staff attended to almost every household chore. Friends celebrated his remarkable comeback. Business partners admired his resilience. Everyone praised the man who had rebuilt his empire from the ashes. Only one person knew the full price that had been paid for that second chance.
Jane.
At first, success didn't change him. He remained affectionate. He surprised Jane with flowers. He took her out to dinner. But as the months passed, something began to change. It happened slowly. So slowly that Jane almost didn't notice. He spent longer hours at the office. Business meetings became more frequent. Weekend conferences suddenly became necessary. International trips increased. Jane understood. She had supported his dreams from the beginning. She never complained. One evening, she prepared his favorite meal: jollof rice, grilled chicken, plantain. She carefully arranged everything on the dining table. When Desmond entered, he loosened his tie and sat down. Suddenly, he frowned. What is that smell? Jane looked around. What smell? He sniffed the air again.
You.
Jane laughed nervously. I've been cooking. He shook his head.
No.
You've been smelling strange lately. Jane's smile disappeared. She quietly looked down at herself. She had showered, changed her clothes, applied perfume. She couldn't understand what he meant. Without saying another word, she cleared the table. She convinced herself he was simply exhausted. A few days later, it happened again. Desmond walked into their bedroom.
He stopped suddenly.
He covered his nose. This room smells. Jane immediately opened the windows. I'll spray some air freshener. He walked out without another word. From that day, nothing she did seemed good enough. If she cooked, he complained. If she cleaned, he complained. If she wore perfume, he said it was too strong. If she didn't, he claimed she smelled unpleasant. Jane became increasingly confused. She began changing perfumes. She replaced soaps. She bought expensive body creams. She even visited a dermatologist. Every doctor gave her the same answer. There is nothing wrong with you still. The complaints continued. One quiet morning, Jane stepped out of the bathroom after taking her shower. As she reached for a towel, Desmond noticed the long surgical scar beneath her nightwear. He stared at it. His face tightened. I hate seeing that scar. Jane instinctively covered herself. It's just a scar. He looked away. It irritates me. I wish it wasn't there. Those words pierced deeper than any surgeon's knife. Jane slowly lowered her eyes. That scar represented love, sacrifice,
Hope.
a second chance. To Desmond, it had become something ugly, something he wished didn't exist. She quietly dressed herself. Not once did she remind him of the truth. Not once did she say, "That scar saved our family." Instead, she smiled through tears he never saw. She had promised herself years ago that love would never become something she used to make another person feel guilty. She intended to keep that promise, even if it broke her heart at first. Whenever Jane asked if everything was all right, he would smile without looking at her. "You worry too much. In building something bigger than both of us." Jane nodded. "I know." She wanted to believe him. Perhaps she needed to believe him. One Saturday afternoon, Jane attended a birthday celebration organized by one of her closest friends. While the women chatted, someone suddenly asked,
Jane.
"Where is Desmond these days?" She smiled. "Business has been keeping him busy." Another woman exchanged glances with the others. "Busy? He hardly comes home anymore." Jane laughed softly. "That's the price of success." Her friend, Amaka, gently held her hand. "My dear, don't misunderstand us. We're only concerned." Jane frowned. "Concerned about what?" Amaka hesitated before speaking. "You've become too comfortable with his excuses." Jane's smile faded. Another friend joined the conversation. "Have you ever checked his phone?" Jane looked surprised.
No.
"Why would I?" "Because sometimes the truth hides inside the phone." Jane shook her head immediately. "I don't believe in invading my husband's privacy." Amaka sighed. "Then ask him to take you along to one of those dinners." Jane smiled. "I'm sure he'll agree." The women looked at one another. No one spoke again. On her drive home, their words echoed inside her mind. Something isn't right. She tried to silence the thought.
No.
Desmond wouldn't betray me. He loves me. Yet another voice quietly whispered inside her heart. Does he still? That evening, Jane prepared his favorite pepper soup. After dinner, Jane finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been burning inside her heart. "Desmond." He looked up briefly from his phone. "Yes?" She sat beside him. "Have I done something wrong?" He remained silent. "I can't continue with this marriage." Jane felt her heart skip. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. The room suddenly felt cold. Very cold. She slowly stood to her feet. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Desmond, what are you saying? If I've offended you, I'm sorry. If I've made mistakes, let's fix them. We've overcome so much together." He finally turned around. His face was expressionless. His eyes held no warmth. Only distance. Only indifference. Jane looked at him, searching desperately for the man she had fallen in love with. But the stranger standing before her was no longer the Desmond she knew, and what he was about to say next would shatter everything she had ever believed about love. The silence inside the living room was deafening. Jane stood motionless. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She searched Desmond's face, hoping he would smile and say it was all a misunderstanding. He didn't. His expression remained cold, emotionless, as though he were discussing a business transaction instead of ending a marriage. Jane took a slow step toward him.
Desmond.
"I don't understand. If I've done something wrong, please tell me. I'll apologize. I'll do better. We've always solved our problems together." Desmond shook his head.
No. You don't understand.
"I've tried. I really have. But I can't pretend anymore." Jane's eyes filled with tears. He took a deep breath, then looked directly into her eyes. "Every time I look at you, I feel irritated." Jane's lips trembled.
What?
He continued, without emotion. "You smell. The entire house smells because of you." Jane instinctively stepped backward. I don't understand. I've seen doctors. I've changed everything." He shrugged. "I don't know, but I can't stand it." Her tears began to fall. Desmond wasn't finished. "And that scar." He pointed toward her abdomen. "I hate seeing it. It disgusts me. I wish it wasn't there." Jane instinctively placed her hand over the scar beneath her clothes. The scar. The very scar she received while saving his future. The scar that represented sleepless nights, silent prayers, and unimaginable sacrifice. yet she remained silent. Desmond continued. I don't enjoy coming home anymore. I don't feel anything when I look at you, if that is truly how you feel.
Then, okay.
Desmond frowned. You mean, no arguments? Jane slowly shook her head.
No.
You want fight for this marriage? She looked at him calmly.
No.
You want beg me to stay? Again. She shook her head. No. He stared at her in disbelief. She continued quietly. If leaving this marriage will make you happy, I won't stand in your way. You are free to go. Within days, lawyers were contacted. The divorce process began. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes. No public fights. No arguments over property. Jane asked for nothing. She simply signed every document placed before her. Every morning, she woke up at exactly 4 a.m. Before dawn broke, she was already kneading dough, mixing flour, preparing meat fillings, frying chin-chin, baking meat pies, making sausage rolls and small chops. By sunrise, she had packed the day's orders. Then she personally delivered them to schools, churches, hospitals, offices, and supermarkets across Lagos. She smiled at every customer. She thanked everyone who bought from her. Months passed. Her pastries became popular. Customers recommended her to others. Schools placed bulk orders. Churches hired her to cater for events. Hospitals requested weekly supplies. Soon, her tiny shop became too small. She rented a bigger space, then employed her first staff member. 5 years after opening her first bakery, Jane B. Foods had become one of Nigeria's fastest-growing food production companies. Her products were now on the shelves of major supermarkets across the country. Orders came from hotels, airlines, hospitals, schools, and large retail chains. The little bakery in Surulere had grown into a modern food processing factory employing more than 200 people. But Jane refused to stop there. She believed growth meant creating more opportunities. She established a logistics company to distribute her products efficiently across Nigeria. Soon afterward, she invested in commercial real estate, then manufacturing, then agricultural processing. One successful business led to another. Within a few years, she consolidated them under one parent company, Jane B. Legacy Holdings. Desmond Adid stood alone inside his once busy corporate office. The silence was unsettling. The reception area that had once welcomed dozens of clients each day now sat almost empty. One by one, his biggest customers had terminated their contracts. Several trusted partners had secretly diverted company funds. A multinational project failed after a key investor withdrew unexpectedly. The auditors have completed their review. He hesitated. We're insolvent. The words echoed through the room. Within months, the company officially shut down. The impressive office building was vacated. The luxury cars were repossessed. The Lekki mansion was sold to settle debts. The same people who once competed for his attention suddenly stopped answering his phone calls. Former business associates disappeared. Social invitations ended. His world became painfully quiet. For the first time in many years, Desmond understood what loneliness truly felt like. He searched desperately for work. Every interview ended the same way. Thank you for coming. We'll get back to you. Nobody ever did. One rainy morning, while scrolling through online job listings in a small rented apartment, one advertisement caught his attention. Group Chief Operating Officer required. The salary was generous. The benefits were exceptional. Desmond Adid spent the next 3 days preparing for the interview. He arrived at the magnificent headquarters of Jane B. Legacy Holdings on Victoria Island. An elegant executive assistant approached him. Mr. Adid? He immediately stood.
Yes.
The chairperson is ready to see you. He followed her down a long corridor, then gently knocked.
Come in.
The voice was calm, graceful, professional. He slowly opened the door. The office was breathtaking. Please have a seat. Desmond took 2 steps forward. The woman lifted her eyes from the file. Time stood still. Good morning, Mr. Adid. Her voice remained steady, as though they were complete strangers meeting for the first time. Desmond struggled to find his voice. Jane opened his application file. then looked up with a warm but professional smile. Mr. Adid G. Shall we begin the interview? If one of your senior executives made a mistake that cost this company millions of naira, what would you do? Desmond answered, without hesitation. Finally, she smiled politely. Thank you, Mr. Adid G. Our Human Resources Department will contact you. On the third morning, while preparing a simple breakfast in a small apartment, his laptop chimed. A new email had arrived. Congratulations! You have successfully passed the first stage of our recruitment process. Kindly report for your pre-employment medical fitness examination before the final stage of your employment. Desmond smiled. He closed the laptop and began preparing for the medical examination. For the next 2 hours, Desmond moved from one department to another. I'm Dr. James Adebayo. The name suddenly sounded familiar. Then it came back. The doctor who treated me. Dr. James nodded with a smile.
Exactly.
I'm glad to see you're looking healthy. Desmond smiled. Thanks to God. And thanks to all of you. The doctor nodded. We simply did our job. For a brief moment, both men remained silent. Then Dr. James asked gently, How is Jane? A warm smile appeared on Desmond's face. She's doing very well. The doctor smiled. I'm happy to hear that. Then his smile slowly faded. He looked at Desmond carefully, almost as though he was searching for something. Finally, he asked quietly.
So,
Dr. James quietly closed the door, then walked toward an old metal filing cabinet standing in the corner. He unlocked it, slowly pulled open one drawer. His fingers searched through dozens of old patient files. Finally, he stopped, carefully removing a brown folder. The edges had faded with time. He gently brushed away a thin layer of dust. Holding the file in both hands, he turned toward Desmond. His voice was calm. This file, he paused, that changed 2 lives. Desmond looked at the folder, then back at the doctor. His heartbeat quickened.
he had no idea why.
Dr. James slowly placed the file on the desk between them. Neither man spoke. He gently turned the pages, then stopped at one document. He slid it across the desk toward Desmond. Read this. Desmond lowered his eyes. At first, living kidney donor. Donor, Jane Blessing. His hands trembled. His breathing became uneven.
No.
This must be a mistake. Desmond broke down. He lowered his head into his hands. The tears came freely. Dr. James allowed him a moment before continuing. The surgery was successful. The foreign patient recovered. The charitable foundation fulfilled its promise. Finally, Dr. James spoke again. I've been a doctor for over 35 years. Remember, an apology cannot erase the past. It can only reveal the truth in your heart. That evening, Desmond drove straight. He approached the reception desk. The receptionist looked up and smiled. Good evening, sir. Good evening. I'd like to see Mrs. Jane Blessing. I'm sorry, sir. The chairperson is still in a meeting. Desmond nodded. I'll wait. As she passed the reception area, she noticed Desmond. She paused briefly. Mr. Adid G? Desmond stood immediately. I am sorry for coming without an appointment. Jane looked at him carefully. His face was different. His eyes were red. Something had happened. She spoke calmly. Come in. Desmond had fallen to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. I'm sorry. His voice broke. Jane stood silently. The doctor told me everything. Please. Stand up. Desmond slowly looked up. I can't. Jane extended her hand. I said, stand up. With trembling hands, he accepted her help. She lifted him gently to his feet. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jane looked into his eyes. I never gave my kidney, so you would spend the rest of your life owing me. Desmond lowered his head. She continued, I gave it because I loved you. Her voice remained calm. Jane nodded gently. Perhaps not. She paused. But everyone deserves the opportunity to become a better person. 3 months later, Desmond Adid G had become one of the most hardworking executives at Jane B. Legacy Holdings. Every morning, he arrived before everyone else. Every evening, he was among the last to leave. Months later, the company held its annual leadership conference. After the guests had left, Desmond knocked gently on Jane's office door. "Come in." He entered quietly. "I just wanted to say thank you." Years later, Jane Blessing received one of Nigeria's highest honors for entrepreneurship and humanitarian service. During a live television interview, a young journalist asked her one final question. "Mrs. Blessing, after everything you've been through, if you could go back in time, would you still make the same sacrifice?" The entire studio became quiet. Jane smiled. She looked directly into the camera, then answered without hesitation.
Yes.
The interviewer looked surprised. "You would?" Jane nodded. "Not because the marriage lasted, not because I was appreciated, but because kindness should never depend on the gratitude of others."
She paused.
Then continued. "If I had allowed another person's actions to determine the kind of person I wanted to be, I would have lost something far more valuable than a kidney. I would have lost my character." The audience rose to their feet. Many wiped away tears. Others applauded for several minutes. Some people will never understand the price you paid for them. Some will forget your sacrifices. Some may even hurt the very hands that once lifted them. But never let another person's ingratitude stop you from being kind. Because true character is revealed, not when people treat you well, but when they don't. Money can replace a house. It can replace a car. It can rebuild a business. But there are some gifts in life that no amount of wealth can ever repay. The love of a faithful heart is one of them. The first time Jane Blessing saved Desmond, she gave him a kidney. The second time, she gave him back his dignity. Kindly like, subscribe, and comment to